Hello, everybody. Joe Sib here with you. Rad Parenting. Anea Bogue, how are you?
I'm great.
You look good.
Thank you. Isn't it funny that people can't see us? Like, do you think anybody knows I talk with my hands as much as I do?
I think if they've seen our photo, they know that I'm an Italian-looking dude, so they're like, oh, my God, that guy was just waving his hands in Anea's face the whole time.
And she's got to wave hers back just to keep up.
Making his points. Today's show, I'm excited to do, it's about dates. You start dating when you first meet your partner.
Yeah.
And then you turn into, you have your relationship.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, someone says, hey, what about getting married?
Yeah.
You do that. You still go out on dates. You still have your friends. You still have everyone around you. You have your support system. You have your nights out. Suddenly, one of those nights out turn into coming home and making a person. So then all of a sudden, there's a baby on the way.
Yeah.
And before you know it, it gets harder and harder to have these nights together.
Yeah.
Before I was married, I would hear couples talk about date night. I'll be totally honest with you. I hated the term.
Yep.
Hated it. What are you talking about? You gotta put on a calendar your date night.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah. Oh, how much fun are we gonna have on our date night?
Right.
Yeah. And then
Zero spontaneity.
zero. Then my daughter showed up.
Yep.
And my wife and I started realizing, I would say after, that first year, you're so afraid to leave. Mm-hmm. Anyone that's just had a baby, you know what I'm talking about. You're
nobody
afraid.
is going to. She'll break.
Yeah.
If we leave her with someone else.
Yeah, I remember we took my daughter to visit my mom in Santa Cruz, and my daughter got a cold, and we declared we were going to leave Santa Cruz. We're going to leave the vacation because she's got a cold. My mom's like, nothing's going to happen, guys. And of course, I did the classic thing. You don't know what you're talking about, Mom. Parenting is different now.
Right.
We should have a show where we have our parents on.
Oh my gosh, that
Yeah.
would be hilarious.
Let's do that.
Okay.
But today's show, depending on when you're listening to it, is about date night and how important it is for mom and dad. Because I always use the analogy that mom and dad, it's like a band. Your family is a band, right?
Yep.
And the kids are like the bass player and drummer. No one really cares. You can make more of them, right? But mom and dad are Mick and Keith, David Lee Roth, Eddie Van Halen.
Yep.
Just they're the guitar singer. And what ends up happening? Look at the Ramones. When Joey Ramone and Johnny Ramone stopped talking, they didn't talk. They were a married couple, and they didn't talk to each other for I think 15 years.
Really?
Yeah. Hence the reason some of those records aren't as good as
Music
when they
trivia.
were talking.
Yeah.
But they kept it together. Mm-hmm. So I feel that in order for mom and dad to continue moving on, date night is so important.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that parents make is they get so, and of course, said it before, when we decide to bring another person into the world or become parents to another little person, that is a big job, a big obligation, and we need to be 100% committed to doing our best. I think where parents go wrong is they don't realize how important date night is to being good parents. Right? Again, I've used my parents as an analogy. It used to drive me crazy that every weekend, every other weekend, they'd basically drop us at one or the other grandparents. We didn't live here in LA. My grandparents were close, and they'd take off. And whether it was they were partying by themselves over the weekend or they were laying around the house naked, who knows what they were doing.
Wow, the picture you painted right there.
Sorry.
Laying around the house naked. That had to be the 70s. Throwing that out there right now.
It was.
Every people listening are like, lay around the house naked. You could go to jail for that.
So anyway, but my parents just celebrated their 50th anniversary, and more important than just 50 years, because there's lots of people like, oh God, 50 years, they still really dig each other. And I truly believe, and there was a conversation my mom had with me when I was finally old enough to sort of get it. And she said, long after your brother and you are gone, your dad and I still need to be together. So if we go on autopilot and don't do anything to nurture our relationship while you're still around, there's not going to be anything left by the time you go. So I think it's really important that this date night conversation truly is a parenting conversation. It's how we can be better parents.
All right. First thing is, it is so hard. When they're younger, we lose ourselves in our kids. Mm-hmm. My wife and I fully did that. We made as many opportunities as we could when they were younger to put date night. It was a little bit easier then because they were so young. But now, how do you, with just the way the world is,
Insane schedule.
we've got softball practice that goes into tutoring. After that, we have also got play rehearsal. Don't forget on the weekend, we got to do parkour. I mean, it's never ending. I'm in a car constantly. I feel sometimes my wife and I, our date is driving together on the freeway after a drop off.
Right. Well, okay. So what I just heard you say was, what we do as parents is we say it is a priority. It is essential to being good parents to our children to make sure that we schedule these different activities to fulfill the opportunity for them to figure out what they're really passionate about or whatever. What I'm saying is it is equally important for you to schedule time or in some way be really committed to having time, you and your partner, as it is to scheduling them to activities. Because you know what? If your relationship falls apart because you're not making it a priority, they won't care about the activities that they get to go to. They're going to be like, wow, kind of sucks that mom and dad couldn't, pull it together.
Yeah. And I think that when you're saying that, what I've noticed a lot of times, even if we can't get out on, say, hey, we're going to have date night Wednesday night, we're going to go and do this because of the schedule with our kids now that they're older. A lot of times our time together could be in the backyard. Our time can be together. And a lot of you guys listening in the morning.
Yep.
As the kids get older, they'll sleep in later. Even on school mornings, we'll get up together and, sure, we're not having margaritas like we might have done in the evening, but we'll be drinking coffee together,
sure,
watching the sunrise, 6 a.m. out front, and having those conversations that we need to have, catching up. And another thing that I try to do, and tell me, is that we try not to only talk about the kids.
Yes.
And I'm telling you,
so
I've never realized how hard that is.
Yes.
It is. It's almost impossible. We'll start talking about something else, and then the road of conversation just leads right back into talking about our kids.
It takes a really conscious effort. And it may mean that you have to say, you know what, I've noticed that every time we're sitting, like I love our time in the morning, or I love our time after the kids go to school, or in the evening, or whatever after they're in bed. But I keep noticing that we always come back to the kids. And if you start only seeing each other through the eyes of like, oh, you're my co-parent, you lose the time and energy that is essential to continuing to see each other as two individuals that found your way into the relationship together in the first place, that now happen to also be parents. And even in terms of like modeling healthy relationships for our children, I think that part of where we've gone wrong in past generations, where people just sort of like stuck it out no matter what, is even when our parents were not happy and they thought they had to stick it out, that then becomes our example of like, oh, I guess that's what marriage looks like. No, it doesn't have to. And we can certainly do it different going forward.
That's such an important part that you just brought up right there, is that growing up, I remember when my parents together, there was, I think my dad would, he'd work, he'd come home, and a lot of times go in the den, maybe watch the news. My mom would start dinner, and that was kind of the dynamic that I grew up with. And now with our kids, with my own family, I want them to see that mom and dad are unified and together, and also we're our own thing.
That's
mom
right.
and dad have
Both
their own
ends.
thing going on, and not just there to answer and do everything for you. That,
Yeah.
hey, check it out. Mom and dad actually have a relationship.
Yes.
Mom and dad actually are in love with each other.
Right.
Mom and dad actually hang out with each other. So down the road, and when my wife and daughter, find their people in their lives, that, they'll mirror, hopefully, that type of relationship.
Your son and daughter.
My son and daughter. What did I say?
Your wife and daughter,
Wow.
which is a whole other show.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. See, once again, it all comes back to talking about my kids or my wife. Everyone listening's like, how many drinks has the guy had before they start the Rad Parenting podcast? I will say this, when you say the mirroring and our kids watching us do what we do.
Do marriage, do parenting.
Yeah. How important is it for them to actually see, mom and dad looking into each other's eyes and just, having a moment together?
I really think that it sets the bar. I think that we're in this weird place, particularly in the Western world, where this sort of like weird fairy tale romantic comedy version of relationship is one example. And then our parents, sometimes getting so caught up in just surviving the day to day, going on autopilot. So also not modeling a realistic but happy, connected relationship. We're just sort of sending our children out there going, I don't know, I guess I'm just supposed to find someone. Like there's this script, like I, go through college, I start dating seriously, I get married, I have a couple of kids. And it's like, really? I mean, I personally want more for my children than that. And I think that most people do. We just don't know how to do it because our parents were just, trying to survive. And a lot of us don't, our parents didn't speak to it, didn't speak to what, like how the challenges of a marriage.
Also the generation that they were following.
Exactly. This is it.
Yeah. There's no shows talking about this for our grandparents.
That's right.
While they were having kids, it was like, I work, I come home, you feed me, I go to sleep, we make a person maybe, and then we move on and just keep doing that.
That's right. And I think that our generation really has this, exciting opportunity to, and not to say that our parents did the best they could with what they had. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. But I think we also have an opportunity in our generation to do it differently and have our kids do it even better.
I think it's important. I'll say this, even with my parents, even though they did get divorced and their marriage fell apart. But when they were together, I still have memories of them having a lot of fun together, which I think I brought that into my own home where we have a lot of fun. So it goes to show you, even if a marriage doesn't make it, while you are together, it is so important to really mirror in front of your kids, mom and dad being that unified group.
Right. And I would argue that even, when you stay connected, through things like date night or, just daily, a commitment to the relationship, your core relationship being the foundation of everything else you create. I think that when you are committed to remaining communicative and present to each other, that even when you come to the point of being like, this isn't working anymore, that the way that you can exit the marriage with your children's best interest in mind, the likelihood of it being done in a way that is respectful and thoughtful and conscious and constructive, not destructive, is that much greater than if you've gone on autopilot and grown so far apart that the only thing that connects you is your kids, and that's the only thing you can actually talk about.
And it just comes back to that responsibility that all of us have in this room, listening to this podcast, of once you become a mom or a dad, how important it is for you to make it a responsibility to raise those kids, and also for mom and dad and dads and moms to show their children a unified front. We had an episode about that. And it really comes down to maybe it's not so much date night, it's unity night. Or so, I don't know. That sounds so like sports oriented.
I think though that the whole notion of date night, has probably come out of us being a little overscheduled, having to have not like one income households, but two income households, and everybody caring a lot. But having a thing that, just like any other, a play date or whatever else you have to put on the calendar, you have to schedule. That's really what I think it's about.
I always say this. I always say that, you spend all the time. I got to make it to the gym to run. I gotta eat right.
Yes.
I need to make sure my career is happening. All the things that men and women are doing for themselves, right? Yep. Make the time for you and your partner to spend some time together, because I know a lot of you feel the same way I did. You're like, how did I even get here? Yep. Oh, I'm in love with you. Oh, that's right. You and I used to laugh together. Not that you're not laughing right now. That's another thing, man. I think the more that people can laugh together, the better. My wife and I, we laugh together more than we have sex. I mean, we laugh while we have sex too. But because it's funny, but we laugh so much. Yes. She always says that, you know what, as long as we keep laughing and when we get together on those nights, and I think everyone could walk away with, like I said, date night, the dinner, the reservations. Okay, that's a lot of work. I get it. But you know what? Go in the backyard, find something that you both can share, whether it's food, glass of wine, whatever, and have that 20, 30, 40 minutes of your time. Yes. Because you are Mick and Keith. You're the band. Yep. And Charlie Watts and whoever's the bass player, Bill Wyman. I don't know where I'm going with this, but you're the front man and lead guitar player.
Yes.
Joe Sib with analogies.
Love it. Love those analogies.
Let's just do a show on parenting analogies.
No, they work because people hear them. They become immediately relevant, and they're easier to understand. I use analogies all the time.
I had someone come up to me at a show recently and say, "You're the analogy guy."
Nice.
And what it really spoke to me was, "You're the guy that hasn't read a lot." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay." That's what happens when you only read Thrasher magazine and Surfer as a kid growing up. Anea, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And everyone else, go out for a date night.
Yes.
You know what we want you guys to do? Hit us up on radparenting@gmail.com and give us some ideas
Yes.
of that's what we need.
What are the obstacles you're facing?
Yeah.
What is the thing that you're like, oh my gosh, like nobody brought these kids with a guidebook. I need to ask somebody about this. Bring it.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask us what you want the shows on. This podcast, as much as I always say, it's our podcast, it's really your podcast. You guys drive the questions, you guys drive the ideas, and also I want some examples of some simple date nights. I think we need that. Just someone might say, we did a picnic. We
Yes,
we
love it.
Yeah.
Great idea.
I like that. So radparenting@gmail.com. We will be back next week. Thank you guys so much for listening. My name is Joe Sib.
And Anea Bo.
And we are out of here.
Later.